So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again, and this is another episode of Day to Day Around the House. In this video, I actually purchased a little swamp cooler. The main purpose I purchased this was to have in my garage to make it a little bit more comfortable because I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and the temperatures get up to the 120 degree range in the summertime. So I'm going to be going over the main components of a swamp cooler just so you have an idea maintenance-wise what it entails. And just going over some other things you might want to consider if you're thinking about buying a swamp cooler for a similar purpose. So let's get to it. So this is the swamp cooler I ended up getting off of Amazon. It was right around $300. It said it would cool down about 900 square feet. So I've got a 3-car garage that's probably right around maybe a little bit more than 600 square feet, which is my primary use of what I bought this for. We've also used it 3 or 4 times on the patio when we've had get-togethers to help cool it down, and it's worked well for that as well. So this does have louvers so you can direct your airflow. The ones that are up and down you have to do manually, and they're split in half top to bottom. There is a swing function for the side-to-side louvers so you can oscillate the air coming out of the cooler. Here's a quick video of the swing function in the on position with a rag in front of it so you can see the direction of airflow, how it's affecting that rag. One of the main things to consider if you're thinking about getting a portable swamp cooler is the size of the reservoir. The reason I say this is this thing has a 10-gallon reservoir and it only lasts about an hour if I fill it all the way to the top to the time that it's down at the minimum water level in the unit. So there is a little flip out tray that you can open up in order to fill it, or if you just flip up the upper lid, you can fill it through the top tray as well because that just drains back into the supply tank. So I went and got a PVC adapter that was 1/2-inch female pipe that would thread onto the float on the outside of the cooler to female garden hose so I could hook a water hose to it, and that would constantly maintain my water volume so I would never run out while we had get-togethers out on the patio. So right here I've got the flip out tray open where you would fill the reservoir up from, and you can see the float on this side, and then on the other side is the water pump to supply the cooler pads. Both of these items are pretty maintenance free. Now obviously a pump can go bad, but it looks pretty easy to replace, and the float can get stuck or start continuously leaking, but neither one of these should be a maintenance concern. The other thing that can eventually go bad on a swamp cooler is the pads themselves. If you're storing your swamp cooler outdoors, the dirt and debris when it's dusty outside can collect on the pads and cause them to become clogged. The other concern is depending on what area you live in, whether you have really hard water. I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we definitely have this problem. Now what can happen is you'll get a calcium buildup on the cooler pads, and that can cause them to become less efficient because the pads will not absorb the water as well. I don't think there's a foolproof way to stop that from happening, but you might be able to prolong it. One of the ways is make sure you empty your tank after you use it if it's going to be sitting for more than a couple days. Right here you can see that I actually left mine for like a week, and you can see the nastiness that started building up in the tank. One thing I wish this cooler would have came with is more of a ball valve to drain it instead of having to completely unscrew and screw this cap in, because for a portable unit you should be doing this after every time you use it if it's going to sit, and that would make it a lot easier. One thing I did get to hopefully help with the odor and smell possibly produced by a swamp cooler is I got these cooler tabs, and you just throw it in the bottom of the reservoir. And that should help keep the odor down from a swamp cooler and keep the water cleaner as well. Especially if you plan on leaving the water in the cooler instead of draining it after every use. One of the main reasons I purchased this swamp cooler was because of the design of the way it disperses the water to the pads. The water pump pumps up into the center reservoir, then it overflows, and there's a bunch of small holes that it evenly distributes the water to the pads. My favorite part about this design is the fact that it's very easy to diagnose. If you're not getting cold air, you can flip that lid up. You can see whether the pump is actually pumping water. It's also very easy to look at your water flow and make sure you're getting even distribution of water to all of the pads. The other neat feature of this design is it actually comes with 3 ice packs. You can throw those in the freezer, and then once again, you just flip up that lid once those are frozen and set them in the cooler. The idea being is the colder the water, the bigger temperature differential you're going to have and make the air coming out colder. However, this wasn't nearly as impressive as I thought it would be. All the times I checked it, it only made like a 2 to 4 degrees difference coming out of the actual vent. So right here, I'm actually using this in my garage. Now, one thing I realized really quickly is you need to draw fresh air in from the outside. When I first started this cooler in my garage, I was getting about a 15-degree temperature difference from what was in the garage to the output coming out of the vent. The longer I ran the swamp cooler in the garage, the more humidity it produced and the less efficient it got because of it. It got to the point where I was only getting a 5 to 8 degree temperature differential from the garage to what was coming out of the vent. The reason for this is it needs to draw dry air in order to evaporate the water off of the pads and make it cool. When you're in a confined area like the garage and it's recirculating that air, once the moisture increases in the garage, you're not going to get as much evaporation off of those pads and therefore not cool the air as good coming out the vent. Now, the other very critical to this thing is depending on the area you live, if it's high humidity, a swamp cooler is going to be very inefficient and might not be worth buying. So now if I ever go to use this in my garage, what I do is open the side door to my garage and I place the cooler right outside the door, blowing air into the garage. And that increases the efficiency because I'm drawing that fresh air into the cooler. So far in the couple months that I've owned this cooler, the best temperature differential I've gotten from the outside air to what it's putting out the vent is about 20 to 22 degrees. I got this with it out on the patio. The outdoor temperature was about 110 degrees with a relative humidity of 12%. And after running the cooler for a little bit, I got down to 88 degrees and you'll notice the humidity climbed to about 18%. However, it always stayed efficient because the air it was drawing in was the outside air that stayed at 12% humidity. One thing that's a little bit more critical on this cooler design with the way it soaks the pads is you do have to be pretty level, otherwise all the water will go to the one side of the tray and you might not soak all of your pads. So if you do get this swamp cooler, the only thing you need to really assemble is put the casters on the bottom of the cooler, and that just requires a Phillips screwdriver in order to do this. I actually used my drill because I could set the torque setting because they are going into plastic and I didn't want them stripping out the holes. There's a good view of the first one I did, and then I repeated that process for the remaining 3. So I do think these are pretty decent quality casters for this unit. However, I wish the diameter was a little bigger because they do get caught on the concrete joints in my garage and I have to kind of lift them up over them. They do have locking tabs on all 4 wheels so you can lock it in place. So I wasn't really impressed with the ice packs, but overall I'm pretty happy with the cooler. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Later.